Violence in the Middle East has escalated, and with it, new political pressure on the Biden administration to act. Last night saw more violence and loss of life in the decades-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is the worst flare-up of violence in 7 years. So far this week, Israel has launched hundreds of airstrikes, and Palestinian militants have fired hundreds of missiles. More than 80 Palestinians, including 18 children, are dead, and at least 7 Israelis are dead, including 1 child. Now, making matters even worse on the streets, violent unrest between residents of mixed Arab-Israeli towns. Joining us now, New York Times diplomatic correspondent Michael Crowley and Robert Gibbs, former Obama White House press secretary and an MSNBC contributor. Michael Crowley, you have a great piece on how this president, who's been dealing with these issues and has been knowledgeable of all the players for decades now, is viewing this at this point. You write, President Biden took office with little interest in pursuing an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement for understandable reasons. Predecessors in both parties had failed in their attempts. Bill Clinton hosted an Israeli-Palestinian summit during his first year in office. Barack Obama appointed a Middle East envoy on his second full day. Donald Trump vowed even before being inaugurated to secure an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal that no one else has managed to get. George W. Bush took up the cause later in his presidency, also facing frustration. You also go on to point out that you quote Martin Indyk, who says the problem with the Middle East is that you can try to turn your back on it, but it won't turn its back on you. So here we are. How are they approaching this?
Right. So, President Biden has made very clear that he is focused when it comes to foreign policy on China foremost, also Russian aggression and efforts to destabilize Western democracies, wants to restore American multilateralism, alliances with Europe. The Middle East is just not high on his list, apart from getting back into this nuclear deal with Iran, which is a notable exception. And in particular, I think he feels like it's a tar pit to try to negotiate an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement, which not only have several presidents failed to do that, but the Trump years, which we can talk in more detail about, left the two sides farther apart. Virtually all analysts agree than they have been in decades. So Joe Biden didn't want to invest a lot of bandwidth and political capital, but now he really has no choice but to confront this. But even now, although the White House is engaging, the State Department has sent an official over to the region. You hear President Biden twice in the last couple of days. He's used the word hope. He said he hopes that things are going to de-escalate. They are really looking for this thing to calm itself down on its own and not command a lot more high-level intervention by the Biden administration. He just does not want to get pulled back into something like this. So they're working it kind of quietly behind the scenes. And again, there's a hope. Biden also says expectation, but I think it's more hope than expectation right now that the two sides will calm down and the U.S. will not have to get more deeply involved.
Robert Gibbs, let me play some of what Michael Crowley is talking about. This is the president today when asked if Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing enough to stop the violence.
My intelligence community, the Defense Department, as well as the State Department, have been in contact with all of their counterparts not only in Israel, but in the region. And one of the things that I have seen thus far is that there has not been a significant overreaction.
Robert Gibbs, I think that no one understands, and you and I both been in this position, and Michael Crowley's covered it. A president's words are no more carefully scrutinized and measured than when he's speaking of this conflict. Talk about what this White House is dealing with and how you think they're doing.
Well, I thought the exact same thing you just said as I watched that video. You can tell how carefully President Biden is trying to answer this question, because much to what Michael said and has written, he understands the challenges for long-term durable peace, but I also think he understands the real challenges in the short term. You're dealing with a very volatile region. You're dealing with a situation that involves Hamas. You've got a lot of other things on the front burner domestically, politically, in foreign policy, and the trepidation is not to get, as Michael said, a lot of bandwidth involved, particularly at a presidential level, unless you think something can come of it. So I think it's an enormous challenge, and I think they're trying to manage it without sort of getting sucked into it becoming the only thing that building is working on.
And Michael Crowley, you alluded to it. Let me ask you to go there. They inherited a situation where, as you said, both sides are farther apart than really. I don't know when the last time that was the case.
Possibly not since before the Bill Clinton presidency. As I mentioned in the article, and you put it on the screen, in his first year in office, Bill Clinton had the Palestinian and Israeli leader to the South Lawn for a ceremony that really marked one of the higher points of the peace process, a moment of great optimism. And the two-state solution just has not come to fruition as many people had hoped and planned. And what you saw during 4 years of the Trump administration was America moving from, something of an impartial mediator. There are people who say that we were never truly impartial, but to this dramatically, explicitly pro-Israel posture, cutting off funding to the Palestinians, cutting off contact with the Palestinians, and presenting a peace plan that was, very slanted in favor of what Israel wanted, and which the Palestinians declared basically dead on arrival. And, what you hear privately from some people in this administration is that they inherited a terrible hand when it comes to this already terrible conflict, that the Palestinians have just been boiling over with frustration, and that sooner or later you are going to have a crisis like this because of Palestinian frustration and hopelessness, combined with increasingly aggressive actions by the Netanyahu government that were like settlement building and territorial claims that were making peace less and less plausible.
Robert Gibbs, you had the sort of window that none of us have had. You saw you saw now president as vice president advising your old boss, President Obama, on these issues. What can you tell us about how he sees the conflict?
Well, again, I think a lot of what Michael says is true. I mean, I think it's understanding the challenges in the region, both as vice president, but also as the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I mean, he's watched this happen for a really long period of time, and he understands that both sides, quite frankly, are unwilling and unable to make the concessions that would be necessary for something in the long term. I do wonder if the last few days don't accelerate the president reaching out to and reconnecting with the Palestinians, speaking directly with President Abbas, or whether it accelerates. We know this is coming, an ambassador probably soon to Israel. Does this accelerate that, or does it push the timetable for trying to get that person not just nominated, but confirmed and over into the region and more active in this process? So I think he understands the pressure. I think he understands the give and take that's necessary. And he understands once you get deeply involved in this, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of bandwidth.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.